we do have like also some time now to discuss, and also like also in a performative way, probably. It's a lot of issues. I mean, maybe you can maybe like tackle this understanding of display visibility that you wanted also to elaborate a little bit more. As a form of production, production, reproduction, that'll be another issue, as a form of, let's say, creating knowledge, let's use this word. I would like maybe to elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, why, let's say, this aspect of what you've called also like virtuality, and virtuality understand as an opening of possibilities, and how this, let's say, can be put into an action. Let's say we talk about like an urban transformation. Do you refer just to, let's say, options of thinking, or this thinking can be, I use the word implemented? Can this new novel thinking then can lead also to concrete actions? So maybe to start up with this.
I still think that I absolutely think that for me, practice and thinking is the same. For me, it's not in opposition. And while I do things, and that's, I think, what is Rainer's argument also, is you do it and then you find out by doing how it is. But if you don't have the framework to theorize it, it never shows to you what it is. So in that sense, you have to develop also this conceptualization, this contextualization. And I think that's what the city planning and urban design and architecture can learn from the arts, because the arts are used to do that for, I don't know how long. So it's completely normal. But for us, it's new, as was indicated by Dimitri. The way of planning the city is still the same as it was, I think, with Haussmann. It's the same technique still. And so although we know about the production of space, to really do something with it, I think that's the next thing. And for example, where I teach in Hamburg, where Bernd Knies is the head of the master program, there's really this experiment to implement the teaching together with the planning. So we had a project that was called University of Neighborhoods. It was part of an exhibition. It was part of a building exhibition, also a German tradition starting with the Mathildenhöhe in Darmstadt, the beginning of 20th century, end of 19th century. And in that, we had this option, do something with students. And we said, okay, actually, that's a great way to show, to work with an existing building, not to do something new, to rebuild, but make this rebuilding process also a performative display. And then you learn, while you make it a display, you learn how to change your own ways of making things visible. One thing. The other thing is how to read. Because Rainer was also talking about deconstruction. I think it's very important, not in the postmodern sense that anything goes, but in the way of deciphering what is, for example, in the build structure as potentialities, to read it for small interventions that then open up new possibilities, and they're very concrete. How you do that, and it has a high level of knowledge connected to that.
Christopher, would you like to comment on that also? I found it interesting. Do you relate what Christopher says to your practice, to your individual, and also like ROM Lab in general?
Yeah, I think it's not a way of new thinking, and I couldn't theorize it because I'm more a practitioner. So, and I pretty much agree, because making is for us as well like research. I mean, the name of our practice is like ROM Lab, which is like space, and labor, which is lab and labor at the same time. So I think it's quite interesting. We are space workers by making, and we learn by making. So I think it's more the openness to processes, the different kind of processes. And I think you need to always accept that it's not a finished state. It's always like openness, and it's going on and on. So, and the other thing is like the performative thing, and sometimes we do something that we call performative research, like behaving as somebody in a specific situation, and then I think you have a double kind of consciousness, like one being the performer. We did it once doing a kind of urban camping site in the middle of Kreuzberg for a couple of weeks, and we all were like the campers, and I felt like going with a toothbrush and the toilet paper in the evening to the toilet. And at the same time, I was like an architect and watching me what I was doing. So I find this kind of interesting.
Rainer, I would like also to ask you to comment on that. I mean, do you find, or like, what are your links, let's say, between like a theoretical approach and a practical approach? Or maybe you see it also from a different perspective, or you see it from a different theoretical point of view?
No, I just can add on this. For me, it's very important really to go into practice and then reflect on it. So what are the outcomes? What is the impact on it? Really to try to understand complexity, to reduce complexity, and to learn out of it for my own work. And how can I transform this, what I can do in this lab situation in Eisenerz? What can I learn there and bring into other processes I'm working in urban development processes, to bring a new spirit into these modes of doing this. So, and this I really try to bring together.
Right. We have like, please.
What I find interesting when also Christoph talks about research, and your approach is also research-based, is that normally in planning or architecture you plan something and you do the research before, but the research is very small. It's more that you have a great idea and then it looks great. It's not that something appears that creates knowledge, traditionally. You want to have Elbphilharmonie or something, it's totally okay. But when we talk about education or knowledge, it's very different. And then one can learn from, for example, the exhibition curatorial studies to make special arrangements so things can appear. Or actors can bring something in, or how you told us that you asked all the participating artists to bring in something, but the way you do it is completely thought out. You reduce it then to a material, so a minimal structure, I would call it. Yes, something that then is not a closed work, but a part of the work, and that can open up as a new structure for a new process. And to learn from that, I think is very important for planning.
I would like also to add something else, because we talked also a lot. I mean, you talk about like, you know, maybe you can say like artist-based research or like improvisation. And I mean, in many cases, of course, it has to do with many projects when you go for funding, for example. But even in the university, you have to describe the project, and then you have also to describe what you want to achieve, what's the target group, which is the impact, which is this and this and this. So in a way, it's like already you describe predictable outcomes. So there is an issue there, like regarding to what we understand under research. So in a way, it's like a self-fulfilled prophecy. Like, you know, I will do this, and then it will bring me to that point. I think it's really very funny. Like I think like Heinz von Förster, the father of second order cybernetics, once said, well, I mean, he did a very big project with NASA in the 60s, actually. He created his career through that. And he was asked, like, you know, how you managed actually to persuade NASA for that? And he said, well, you know, I did the research, I had the outcomes already, and then I sold it to them. So I think it gives a little bit like an impression about how we are thinking right now in a peculiar way. It doesn't open up, let's say, when we move on into more like institutional frameworks, we find obstacles in terms of like, you know, persuading, and this is also from a curatorial or from an artistic point of view, but not only, to persuade also, let's say, legal systems or systemic thinking in general, that improvisation, and also improvisation that might lead to non-results or like to, you know, mistakes, you know, and so on, is an essential part of, let's say, what research is. Maybe you would like to comment on that a little bit, because I think it's extremely important. Yeah, or like from the public also. Yeah. Please.
Because I would say that it's also about improvisation. There's a complete misunderstanding, same as with work. When we say improvisation, it's when something get terribly wrong, and so we had to improvise. But today I know, and tomorrow I know better, I have a plan. And I don't know how many young people sit in Berlin who call up their parents every evening to say, we have a plan, just send me 500 euro and I know what I do, but they know exactly that they don't know what they do. But it doesn't mean that they are not grown-ups in the sense. Yeah? They have a completely different concept of what a plan is. In that sense, I think one has to differentiate between different modes of improvisation. One is the repair mode, and that's a neoliberal mode. We are sent out to repair all the time. It goes wrong. Then we promise a new plan, and we go completely dizzy by pretending plans. It doesn't work at all. It's complete, and everybody knows it, but nobody dares to say it because, you know. And that's the other thing for me, which I see in your project, is what I call improvisation as technology, and that's where you transcend the plan. You know, when you have 5,000 plans, when it's a technique, what Hannah Arendt calls a faculty of judgment, because there are two ways of judgment. One is the bestimmende Urteilskraft, is you apply something. It's great that we have that in industrialization. But the other one is the reflective Urteilskraft, reflexive Urteilskraft with Kant, and that's where you think about what rules are, how rules are created. And that's the whole thing where we have to go, and how I see your project also, to create that Urteilskraft about what the city is and so on. But that is difficult to convince politics for that. I think that's normal, and that's part of the struggle.
I think this is part of the game that you kind of described. I think to fill in the forms and to say what the project will be about. I think this is like a bureaucracy. And then we have to do this a lot with the kind of co-op campus, because the whole project is based on funding. So, but on the other hand, we do what we want. So, I mean, then you have to deliver some outcomes in the end. But what you describe, I think this is a crucial part of our work. I mean, we always show this image from Brazil. Can you fix it? No, I can't, but I can bypass. So I think to find a bypass, a loophole to work around situations and find a solution in a kind of process-oriented way of working.
The only thing that I think is important then to not idealize poverty. I think that's very important, because that's a favela chic, where when you always say, oh, you look at that, it's great, and they do it and all that. I think it's very important to go back to the technical aspect to it, and it's different everywhere. And some people are great at it, some are not, but I think it's a matter that you can, and that refers to your lecture, you have the choice to do it or not. I think that's political, and that's why I totally agree with you. First, political discussion. Do we have the choice to improvise or not, or are we forced to improvise?
That was very to the point. Maybe you can open up the discussion. It's like, yeah, there's a question, please. Yes. Do you have a mic? Do you have a microphone? No. Okay. You can hear me, right? Okay.
I don't know. Sound technician should.
Okay. Exploit the piano mic. Actually, I have two questions. First one is very specific. It concerns Eisenert's present. I want to know if Eisenert's incorporates elements from its industrial past artistically in its new profile as a community, as a city. And the second one is more general. Is it easier to transform a community, or for a community to be transformed, your choice, after a process that takes place after a long period of time, after the deterioration of the mining industry, or after a shocking event? Let's say the Austrian government banned overnight iron mining. What would happen next? I mean, is it easier in the first case or in the latter one? Thank you. That was it.
So first question about integration of the elements of the past into the new development. So for sure you find these elements everywhere. So I think it's very important to go not into the trap that you historize these elements. So this is also a part of arts and culture, to bring it together, traditional elements with avant-gardistic elements, and see how can this transform. So this is a very important issue also. I showed you the migration, outward migration, so population development. And so we have a selective mobility. So there are much more women moving out of this situation because it's a very traditional place with strong patriarchic structures out of these mining situations. So with art and culture, we must also build these playgrounds where young people that are not in this historical, traditional cultures inhabited it, to have some space where they can go, so that they also have the feeling they can connect to the community. So this is a very important issue for the future development of the community. And yeah, in general, creating these playgrounds is also, I think, arts and culture can do very well in doing this. The second question was about how to transform.
Is it easier to transform after a shocking event or after a process that takes place over a period of years or decades?
Oh, what a big question. And so I don't really know it, but I know when I'm just speaking of the example of Eisenerz. So when we see now these graphs, so we think, hey, you should have made decisions in the 1960s because since then it's going down. Decisions had been made in the middle of the 2000s. So 40 years later, so in the middle of the 80s, mayors had been saying, oh, no, it's just temporarily, you will see, we will get back like it was 20 years ago. So they didn't have this shocking element. So they maybe didn't get awake. It was a long process, but hard to say if you need the shock. So I don't know. Hopefully not when we think in general social connections. Do we need the shock? So as discussed before about ecological issues, do we need the shock to change? Or can we transform out of ourselves?
Maybe another question. We take one question, 1, 2. Yes, please, Nicholas, please.
Please come here to pose the question.
It's a question about order, because in political economy, even from the very beginning of the 18th century, you have the notion that there is some type of order, an equilibrium that is actually implemented by the very actions of those who seek their own interests. It's the notion that you can have the invisible hand of Adam Smith, or even before that with Adam Ferguson, that in fact what happens if people look after their own is a better design than the one that someone could have thought beforehand. To give you another example, back in 1826, von Thunen described the notion of the isolated state, the isolierte Stadt, where he tried to show that in space the cultivation of different types of products actually expand in concentric circles just by the economic reasoning of the costs and the production conditions of that. So, in a sense, we have the notion of non-intended consequences, where something happens, a type of spontaneous order that works well. And in economics, the question is, how come that you can have big firms like, say, Google, that employ hundreds of thousands of people, and they do not actually obey the laws of the market, but allocation is done hierarchically. So there is a frontier between hierarchical allocations and also allocations done through the market. So this, and people talk about the harmony of the markets and all that. We know that this does not really work out, as we say, but inherently in political economy is an attempt to prove that anarchy in production works well. And I would like to know what is the response to that of people who actually discuss order in terms of city and from another different discipline?
That's a very, very interesting question, because in an abstract level, this anarchy can be calculated because you have a certain outcome. You can then calculate statistically, okay, in that territory this happened like that, and so the anarchy somehow happened and worked out. But to visualize that anarchy, as a productive anarchy, is very hard. And in city planning, you have to do with a visual technique. You visualize quarters, you visualize spatial arrangements, and it's just a given fact that, for example, when you see in the same time when they thought in economics already about the anarchy, in city planning, like with the functionalism in the beginning of the 20th century, it's a complete opposite. It's really the disgust of the normal city, even of the Haussmannian city, is a complete disorder, and Le Corbusier, people like that, really want to re-establish an order that functions. And their model is actually what you have shown with Galbraith. Yeah? The performative, where Taylor comes from. The Tayloristic idea, you check every performance, you plan it, and you have a fantastic city. One has to remember that, for example, the Baunutzungsverordnung, the building law in Germany, is still based on functionalism. The whole way we see it, every new ideology, autogerechte Stadt, or this or that, that's how we plan city, all came from functionalism. So in there you have a backlash, you could say. And like ROM Lab or what Rainer has now laid out with shrinking cities, these are all, for example, shrinking cities, I can tell you that at that moment when shrinking cities was happening in the beginning of the mid of the 90s, it was not allowed for the mayors of the East Germany to allow to use the word shrinking city. It was not allowed. In the sense of you bring a bank down. Yeah, now everybody, so just to say we are a bit back in that, because it's hard to visualize, to understand, and it's still in the process to understand it, and not really as a total anarchy, but as what you call then production of space with all its unintended things.
Sounds really very interesting. I see here like an option for like probably like political economy, like learning from techniques of visualization and display in the way that you describe it. I don't know if I can say that, but it sounds that it's a viable option. Right.
We have that. There is the so-called micro-motives of macro behavior, where you can, like people like Schelling, where they have produced visual patterns of by going to the methodological individualistic aspect, and you can create patterns through the behaviors of... Please.
Now you say micro-motive pattern. City planning architecture was problem solving. 20th century, you sell yourself as a problem solver. Now, for example, at that master in Hamburg, where Bernd Knies has developed another thing, which is not problem-based learning, but motive-based learning. Now, this is so hard to do, to do that. I mean, to see that happen, one thing, but then to do it yourself, motive-based, working with special arrangements. It's just the experience I have. We are at the beginning.
This is the very problem of economics, because all those agent principal models fail because you have the strategic interaction of the people that it doesn't work like that. Even in industrial sociology, we know that Tayloristic models do not work, and you have to find other modes of control because the frontier of control changes. And we always have examples of people, workers, who are actually timed by the time and motion guy, and they always find ways to overcome the attempt to impose control on them.
And there's also this theory in GDR, the more rigid the system, the more improvisation you have. But nonetheless, it's the part of now, do you have to hide your improvisation, or can you put it out, come out of the closet with it, and use it as a knowledge, but also be able to read it. And I think that's will be the next step. And you say control, that's also control, but also enabling.
Indeed.
If there is no other very pressing questions, I mean, of course, we can really, I mean, we can also like take more time and then discuss, but if not, then we can probably start with some closing remarks. I don't have to make any closing remarks, no. Just say that basically that our effort was exactly that, what's happening right now. I mean, to combine like different disciplines, multiple disciplines. I believe in a truly, to my view at least, transdisciplinary way, different experiences also from different countries. I think it became also clear that we have like different approaches from, I mean, basically all over the world. We included also our friends from the United States and Latin America also. It was a very important part of what we did, this connection between theory and practice, and we do have a lot of people here also that are both, or that they are interested in this very precise relation. Absolutely an approach that maybe we can call it an interagency approach. We try to include in our discussion public bodies, of course, the Municipality of Thessaloniki, private bodies, educational institutions, educational and uneducational institutions, citizens' organizations, and so on. Our goal was exactly that, like to give you some narratives, probably, to give you some storytelling, create, like promoting, trying to promote creativity, our creative thinking, first of all. Probably possible collaborations, we'll be very happy if that comes up. And of course, also in a way, also like to give opportunities. I think in a way we did it also in a small scale. You know, we have our team here, students from very different fields, media, architecture, art, design, geography, sociology, and so on, political economy, that contributed also to the making of that conference. Indeed, maybe we can say we offered, let's say, questions, and I hope you can start thinking with those questions and like finding answers. Someone in the conference said, well, any type of change usually needs time, and I think like Artecitya is also about this time-making agency or judgment capacity. Well, I would like to give the
So
mic
thank
to
you
Lydia.
everyone very much for these 2 days. The videos of all the talks are going to be available on our YouTube channel for if you missed anything or you want to go back to it. Thank you to the speakers, the great speakers, those who came here and also those who contributed with the video statements. It was an amazing content in my view. To all the institutions who organized this conference. Of course, the live stream institutions who also hosted the broadcast, and the wonderful crew of people who were working tirelessly for many days, our interpreters, practicing cognition, who designed the space, our wonderful piano players, Giorgos, Despina, Martin, Eli, and Elias, Simos, and Christos, and of course the trainees who participated and learned this whole new thing. Christos, Theodoros, Sofia, Irini, Eleni, Maria, Alexandra, Cortesa, Iliana, Sava, Anastasia, and Petro. I promise to remember all your names in the next days, and because we will work together again very soon. And my close team, Aris from Goethe-Institut, the director of Goethe-Institut, Peter Panes, Christos and Maria from the office. I don't think I'm forgetting anyone. Let's say that the clapping...
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Sotiris.